one issue that's kind of outside of the book, and that is something. So a couple weeks ago, you had a little bit of a dust up with Spike Cohen over this, and this is something that you wanted to correct me on in terms of the Uyghur Muslims over in China, or at the very least, I think your point was we don't know enough yet in order to be able to classify what's going on. So, is it something that's more akin to like internment, like we had here in the United States in the World War II era, or is it closer to a methodical genocide, like a lot of folks have painted it as?
Yeah, I think it's more like somewhere between Japanese internment and regular prison for convicts. And
Okay.
forget Auschwitz. That has nothing to do with this. There's no mass killing going on at all. And imagine the Americans pointing their finger talking about genocide after 6 years of war in Yemen, still ongoing, with absolute minimum 500,000 people dead, and the UN predicting 400,000 children could starve to death this year because of Obama and Trump and now Biden's genocidal war against those people. You want to talk about genocide? How about bombing the waterworks and the sewage and the garbage and the cholera hospitals in the middle of the largest cholera outbreaks in recorded history? There's a finger pointed outward and 4 fingers pointed back every time the government tries to make these accusations. And frankly, for all the damage done to the people of Iraq, you could say it amounts to a partial genocide. They certainly destroyed that society. They certainly, razed it to the ground and killed upwards of 1 million people. Probably more than 1 million people died in that thing. And yet, not to justify it, but just in context, that really was collateral damage. That wasn't the point. That was what happened as the result of the stupid, horrible, bad policies that they were pursuing. But This is different. In Yemen, and I'm not just changing the subject, I'll get back to China in a second, but in Yemen, the policy is deliberately to starve the people to death, to destroy the farms, to destroy the markets, to destroy the fuel, to blockade all the fuel, and, to bomb the trucks, bomb the horses in their stables, bomb the fishermen's boats on the Red Sea, to do everything they can to starve these people into submission in absolute violation of all the Geneva Conventions and the American war crime statutes and every bit of this. Their only excuse is that, hey, we're leading from behind. No, it's the Saudi-led coalition, But America's the world empire, and they're our client state. They came to Barack Obama for permission in the first place, and they got it, and they've had support from the United States all along. And then Biden claimed he was calling that support off, but now news just came out today, or yesterday, I saw it today, that there's a brand new shipment of weapons going to the United Arab Emirates, who are co-belligerents in the war and primary sponsors of Al-Qaeda in the war. And so, when you talk about genocide, there's only one real genocide in the world today, and that's the United States in Yemen. And when it comes to the destruction of a nation by, means other than murder, then who's pointing at Palestine? Israel and Palestine, again, where the United States of America is responsible. Here we're supporting this war in Afghanistan. All these years in the name of what? In the name of allowing the government of Kabul to consolidate control over the rest of the country, to tame those Pashtuns, right? Well, that's exactly what the Chinese are doing in the Xinjiang province. Is essentially, it's a massive modernization program where they're trying to force people from the countryside into the cities. Well, they're doing that all over China, right? They're trying to take poor country peasants and move them to the cities and master plan them into the new century. So this is, 21st century red-brown Chinese communism, with fascist characteristics. It's not free market capitalism. It's an extremely state-controlled economy. Nobody in China is free. But the project as it's taking place in the Xinjiang province is essentially the same thing that's happening everywhere. They're trying to force people into urban life. And then so a lot of what's happening in these camps is job training and all of this kind of stuff. But then you have all these stories of, mass rapes and, mass organ harvesting. And, they're forcing IUDs on, prophylactic devices on all of the women in order to prevent them from reproducing and all of these things. But all of that is a bunch of hype. You know, what's happened is the Uyghurs used to be exempt from the one-child policy. They could have 3. Now, the Han Chinese are allowed to have 2, and the Uyghurs are being brought down from 3 to 2. Now, again, somebody tries that in my neighborhood, everybody's grabbing their rifles and we're going to war, okay?
Yep.
That ain't freedom. That ain't liberty. And that ain't the way any Uyghur or any Han or anybody else deserves to be treated, okay? That's not genocide. What genocide is, in this case, is an American and allied propaganda campaign to try to demonize the Chinese in order to stir up trouble for them and make their Belt and Road Initiative and, you know, their other projects in Central Asia more difficult, essentially. Yep. And which also kind of puts the lie to the entire thing. Why would the Chinese wage a campaign of genocide against Muslims in Western China if they're trying to build a road to Lisbon, Portugal over the next 40 years? And so just so that they can have an Islamist insurgency to put down the whole time from, you know, all the way to, you know, the western edge of Kazakhstan or whatever. I don't think so. And look, so the vast majority of the worst of these accusations can all be traced back. I mean, dive in, do your Google, dive in, and almost all this stuff can be traced back to one German holy roller, you know, kind of kook named Adrian Zenz, who's one of these guys who says Jesus is about to come back and do the rapture and send all the Jews to hell for refusing to convert and all of this kind of stuff. So in other words, if he was coming out of San Antonio and the Cornerstone Church and, you know, with John Hagee and was telling you, yeah, let me break down all the numbers of what's going on in the Xinjiang province, you'd laugh his ass right off of the stage and right out of the room, right? Yep. Well, same thing, only the German version. And then his numbers are all a bunch of crap. And of course, the great Gareth Porter and Max Blumenthal did a great piece at the Gray Zone Project where all they did was go through and examine his numbers and see if they said what he said they said. And of course they didn't, all over the place. And by one measure, the way he had it was that each woman in Xinjiang would have had to have had 1,400 IUDs implanted in her every day for 3 years or whatever it was, right? Like they're just making stuff up. And then he's like, look at the pictures. Here's where all the women are being forced to accept their birth control. And it's a picture of a bunch of elderly people lined up to get their free communist health care that clearly has nothing to do with reproduction at all. These women are in their late 60s and 70s. And this is supposed to be supporting evidence of that. And then you have all of these eyewitness accounts where the lady goes, yeah, I used to be a teacher in the work camp. And yeah, it was pretty brutal. They wouldn't let anybody eat meat, you know? And then the next time anybody interviews her, she goes, yeah, no, I was a prisoner there and I got gang raped and they forced us all to eat pork and all of this stuff. And it's like, you're such a liar, dude. Yeah. How could your story go from I used to work there to gang rape victim other than you're a liar? And then you have all these interest groups, just like if we're talking about Chechnya or anybody else, you always have these, you know, foundation bankrolled interest groups and Lord knows I got to memorize all their names now, the Uyghur Free Congress and all these different things. And, you know, I've seen this movie before. We saw it, you know, especially in the case of Iraq and all the Iraqi exiles telling us, trust us, this is all what's going on there. And every bit of it was just lies. And then I'm sure you've noticed this too. I see this all the time on Twitter, and not just right wingers, but libertarians too. And the way they always frame it is, where are the Uyghur genocide deniers? How dare you deny the thing that I have not demonstrated is true at all? Yeah. I don't have a single footnote to even cite. Just, I heard on TV like 6 times that we're all supposed to believe in this now. And now, oh my God, it's just like when we said never again after the Holocaust, and we're letting it happen again. And it's like, you know what? You haven't even begun to demonstrate the truth of any of this.